A couple of bits of context. Firstly, A2EP is a small, independent, not-for-profit, non-partisan and kind of optimistic coalition. And our mission is to double energy productivity in Australia by 2030. We're based here at UTS in the Institute for Sustainable Futures, and we've been on their couch now for a few years. A one-year project stretched a bit. Like everybody else, we blame South Australia. Just as we thought the demand side was in the ascendant, evidenced by the first National Energy Productivity Plan, things changed. Our tagline is doing more using less, but we're not hair shirts. If productivity, profitability and well-being improve as a result of using more energy, that's fine. As long as every effort is made to squeeze every possible output from every unit of input, and as long as the starting point is outcomes. We're much less interested in energy per se than what it does. It heats, cools, moves, illuminates. We think that the starting place, most appropriately, is use. A couple of contextual numbers. The latest are that Australia spent about $136 billion on energy in the year to 2016 July. There are about 10 million electricity account holders in Australia, including those jurisdictions outside the NEM, and that spend accounts for about 8% of GDP, so it's worth bringing some focus to. How's Australia doing? Like other developed economies, we've succeeded in unhitching growth in output from energy consumption. That's got to do with structural change towards a service-intensive economy, energy supply efficiency, energy use efficiency, and some other things. However, according to the IEA, and in comparison with other member countries, we're not doing so great. Our rate of improvement is slow, our regulatory frameworks are limited, and our progress on policy is kind of laconic. A bit of good news from the IEA is that our white certificate schemes are proving really effective, even if they're inconsistent, unharmonised, and in some jurisdictions absent altogether. Our proposition can be distilled into three themes. The first one is optimise. It doesn't matter if we're talking about a bakery or a duplex. The focus for energy consumers ought to be on the services they need and how to deliver them most effectively. The first and best place to start is with the result, the temperature, the lighting, the business process. By way of example, and I don't mean to be unkind given a remark in the earlier session, but thinking about a public housing unit in North Queensland, you'd maybe check on the insulation, the air conditioner, the hot water service and a refrigerator before you went to install solar PV. And then you'd want to right-size the system, orient it in the right direction, and connect it to the right tariff. Even if cost or other factors prevent action on the best and first fixes, it's smart to know where the fruit is. Integration. Closely related to optimisation and a form of optimisation. This is about getting value greater than the sum of the parts and about avoiding getting less than the sum. The plethora of so-called emerging products and services are often considered, bought and sold in isolation, without regard to the potentials or pitfalls from integration. In some work I did a few years ago, we identified that the risk of consumer detriment from emerging services was most likely the result of the ways that they did or didn't function effectively together. The relatively simple combination of a smart meter, a time of use tariff and a rooftop PV system can be a real winner, or not. If you add in a contract for energy performance or demand response, a battery, and some data-driven automation systems, you're playing poker. And then there's the market for plug-and-play devices, and more than a little confusion about whether what you're buying is energy, some other service, or a financial product. The issue in the end is, do people get what they want? Do they get what they pay for? I'm aware of the kind of like complexity around the idea of information, giving it, getting it, producing it, and I know that it's different from engagement, but I do think that we've got a problem with information, and we know a bit about what we don't know. For consumers, analysts and developers, market institutions and policymakers, there are huge gaps in the availability of data and data turned into information. There are more or less 3 million smart meters installed in the small consumer sector in Australia. 3 million. Most of them, of course, are in Victoria. I'm a little out of that loop, but I tried on Monday and failed to find a consumer retail product in the Victorian market that delivered on the promise of real-time data with a standard smart meter. I could get real-time data if I upgraded and paid an extra $15 a month, but that was part of a solar package. We need more effective approaches to communicating cost and value over the life of a product and to the relationships between products and services. Given the conversations that we've had today, I'll confess that I still believe that most consumers aren't that much interested in energy, except for the quarterly or monthly sting. We need to get better at helping people set so that they can forget. As to action, a couple things. We need to properly resource the National Energy Productivity Plan. It exists, it's well thought through, it's fairly comprehensive. It needs to be revived and refreshed. But as the IEA observed last week, we do have a comprehensive plan, it just doesn't have a budget. We need to facilitate, incentivise and reward investments by consumers. And there's a couple of ways of doing that, many ways of doing it, white certificates, tax breaks, whatever. But we need to go to them. We need to accelerate innovation, including through updating the ARENA mandate. We need to demonstrate the potential. We need to show people what is possible in fairly physical sorts of ways. We've got vehicles to do it. We need to improve and share the knowledge base. We need to build tools. Some of us are working in the dark. A lot of people are working in the dark. No pun. We shouldn't be. With regard to households, particularly, we need to accelerate the implementation of a residential ratings and disclosure framework. We created the NEM. We actually created the National Energy Market. Like, we made a decision to do it. I didn't, but they did. But we can do the same with residential disclosure. We need to accelerate increased stringency of performance standards for homes, for buildings, and for appliances. A 6-star home uses 24% less energy for heating and cooling than a 5-star. It's a no-brainer. We really ought to be doing it. The business stuff, I think, is self-explanatory. And I'll come back right at the end to the question that I was asked, which is the critical policy setting. And I think it's a focus on the user and the use. And then it's a bit about optimism. Coming back to South Australia, credit where it's due, I'm sure that the analysis over time will be nuanced, but they've demonstrated that business as usual isn't quite the way of the immediate future. Thanks.